A century ago, 1.5 million of us worked as servants. Astonishingly, that's more than worked in industries or on the land. My great-grandmothers were servants, and coming from this background, I want to find out about the reality of their lives. Country houses like these simply wouldn't have been able to function without a whole army of staff working away above and below stairs. When I come to places like this, my first instinct isn't to go through the grand formal entrance, but to find the servants' door and go in that way. In this series, I want to dispel the nostalgia and fantasies that we have around domestic service and reveal a much more complex world. I'm going to tell a very different sort of history, one of suppressed passions, strict hierarchies, and an obsession with status and class. Digging through the archives, I'll track down the lost lives of real servants, whose voices have largely been forgotten. Who's this?
Me. I wasn't bad looking, was I?
Yeah, you were very good looking.
We were underdogs. We weren't on the same level as them. And we had to know our place.
I'll visit the homes of the super-rich and the anxious middle classes in order to understand how servants actually lived and worked. But above all, I want to ask some difficult questions that have been left unanswered for decades.
Amazing, isn't it?
Our country was based on an ideal around service for so long. Why was that? Why did that world disappear? And what uncomfortable truths can we uncover by looking at the reality of servants' lives? Between the mid-18th and mid-19th century, grand country houses sprung up all over Britain. New wealth from the British Empire and the Industrial Revolution transformed feudal homes into the grand estates of a new ruling class. One of these was Erddig Hall in North Wales. Erddig was home to local landowners, the Yorks, and their staff, 30 outdoor estate workers, plus 15 indoor servants. In the servants' quarters, the first thing you see is a poem blessing them all. May heaven protect our home from flame, or hurt or harm of various name, and may no evil luck betide to any who therein abide, or who from homes beyond its gate bestow their toil on this estate. And toil's the word. The hall was built on a generous scale, 200,000 square feet of house, with 6 formal reception rooms, a chapel, a grand dining room, and 9 family bedrooms. In order to service these rooms, there were twice as many rooms downstairs and in the outhouses, each with their own specific function, from the kitchen and the scullery to the laundry and the bakehouse. The family upstairs could summon the servants to any part of the house at any time. Erddig might seem quiet now, but in its prime, the economic scale of the work that kept it going was staggering. Every week, 3 tons of coal were carried around to fuel 51 fireplaces, 5 ovens and 3 coppers. 200 to 300 gallons of water were carted around different parts of the house for cooking, cleaning and washing. And for washing, we're talking up to 600 items per week. Then there's the food. 4 meals a day for up to 30 people. That would be the family and their staff, guests and their staff. And all this was done by hand by a small army of servants working 17-hour days all year round with no modern technology. This scale of service was repeated in country houses across the British Isles. But what's so unusual about Erddig is that the family had a long-standing tradition of having portraits made of their servants. This is the family of servants at Erddig in 1852. Family of servants at the front, the real family at the back in that window there. Each servant is depicted carrying an implement or a tool relating to their role in the house. And historians call these loyalty portraits. You find them up and down the country in servant-keeping houses. We've got the butler with his bottle, the housekeeper with a brace of fowl, the lady's maid with her sewing kit. What's particularly nice about this one is that the employers wrote poems to go with the portraits. Here's what they say about the butler. Our butler in the foreground shown as Thomas Murray well was known, he who does nigh centre stand with bottle clasp within his hand. Clever was he at drawing cork, and a good hand at knife and fork. And I really like this one about the lady's maid. They don't seem to like her so much. Nearby our butler, Mrs. Hale, of whom our memories much do fail. As lady's maid she sojourned here, black was her dress, her face austere. And whence she did for Brighton leave, no one here a sigh did heave. Oh dear. The photograph and the poem give us a revealing glimpse into life below stairs. They hint at the tension between the staff themselves, whose lives were governed by a strict hierarchy. In houses like Erddig, the butler was at the top of the pile, overseeing the coachman and footman. He was in overall charge of the house, alongside the housekeeper, who hired the housemaids. The cook dominated a separate world, controlling kitchen maids to prepare food, dairy maids to make butter and cheese, and scullery maids for the washing up. The governess and head nurse took care of the children's universe, while the lady's maid and valet, close to their mistresses and masters, stood separate from the other servants. And at the very bottom of the pile were the laundry maids and hall boys. The hall boy usually slept in the servants' dining hall on a fold-out bed. Sadly, we don't know much about the hall boy at Erddig in the 1850s, a lad called Edward Davis. But hall boys in other houses did record their 16-hour days in gruelling detail. The hall boy at Longleat was a lad called Gordon Grimmett, and he wrote in his memoirs that every day he had to trim, clean and fill all the lamps and candles in the house, and that could be up to 300. And every morning, before the other servants even woke up, he had to polish 60 pairs of staff boots. Every servant acquired a very specific set of skills, learning from senior servants or from household manuals.
How to clean ladies' boots. The following is an excellent polish for applying to ladies' boots. Mix equal portions of sweet oil, vinegar and treacle with 1 ounce of lampblack. When all the ingredients are thoroughly incorporated, rub the mixture onto the boots with the palm of the hand and put them in a cool place to dry.
The pecking order was even played out when the servants ate their meals together in the servants' hall.
Mealtimes were a time when the status, the hierarchies between servants were enforced. There would be a strict order of coming in to eat and strict rules about where different ranks of servants might sit. And you might also have rules such as no speaking unless you were addressed by one of the senior servants. And the senior servants had a great deal of power, so the butler, for example, in some households would put down his knife and fork and everyone else had to finish eating, whether you'd finished or not. So servants had to learn to be fast eaters.
Some houses had a strict set of rules governing behaviour in the hall. You even had to pay a forfeit if you broke them. For instance, Rule 4, that if any person be heard to swear or use any indecent language at any time when the cloth is on the table, he is to forfeit 3d. Rule 7, whoever leaves any pieces of bread at breakfast, dinner or supper forfeits 1 penny.
But there was also divisions between the different branches of domestic service. So famously, cooks were often very protective of their space. And the kitchen staff sometimes wouldn't eat here in the servants' hall, but had the privilege of being able to eat in the kitchen. And the other servants always suspected that they had better food.
And of course, I imagine some servants had to serve the other servants.
That's right. You would have had the very junior servants learning their trade, if you like, by serving in the servants' hall.
Way above the hall boy, the most powerful female servant at Erddig was the housekeeper, and her room is still immaculately preserved. From here, she did the accounts and tradesmen's orders, marshalled the female staff, and looked after the most precious items, such as the china and the linen. In 1852, the housekeeper here was Mrs. Webster. One of the most iconic objects associated with a housekeeper were her keys. And here's Mrs. Webster, the housekeeper at Erddig, with her keys in her lap. In fact, it was said that it was a mark of a good housekeeper that she could strike fear into the hearts of the lower servants with a mere jangle of the keys. Mrs. Webster didn't just look the part. Her employer's poem paints her as the perfect frugal employee who rose through the ranks. Upon the portly form we look of one who was our former cook. No better keeper of our store did ever enter at our door. She knew and pandered to our taste, allowed no want and yet no waste. And for some 30 years or more the cares of office here she bore. Although Erddig's loyalty portraits and poems suggest a cosiness between masters and servants, the reality is starkly different.